Welcome to Power Lunch Live. I'm Rhett, your host. We do the program every Tuesday through Friday around 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. And welcome everybody, even if it's early morning on the West Coast or wherever you are in the world. Welcome. Not necessarily lunchtime, I realize. The point of the show is to have today's thought leaders, best-selling authors, people who are doing amazing work in the world, who we can all learn from so we can get better at what we do. Now, one of the fun parts about the show is that it's interactive. The way that happens, though, is that if you get on your keyboard and ask your questions. Now, we're broadcasting on multiple channels: Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, and a few others. So ask your questions. We'll monitor those feeds, and we'll certainly get to those questions because that's, again, one of the reasons why we're here. If you like the program, give it a like or share so that your network can benefit from these conversations as well. And I hope you're enjoying your quarantine and your isolation. Hopefully you're doing it with some people that you love and have a good time with and enjoy. And I know I'm having a good time. This has been a real interesting and fascinating time for me. Now today I've got Morag Barrett. She's a sought after speaker and CEO of SkyeTeam, an international HR consulting firm and leadership development company. Her insights have been featured in Inc.com, Business Insider, American Management Association, among others. She's a regular contributor to CIO.com and Entrepreneur.com. And she is the best-selling author of Cultivate, The Power of Winning Relationships, as well as The Future-Proof Workplace. Morag, welcome.
Hey, Rhett, great to be here. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, me too. Because wow, is it an interesting time, and is it an interesting time to be in HR? Wow.
Yeah, it feels like you're not just in the spotlight, you're in the spotlight, the hot seat, and every other point of intersection, I think, at the moment as we deal with this. And the world has just gone topsy-turvy. I know I've ridden not just the change curve, but the roller coaster of emotions. People have asked me, well, what emotions have you experienced? And the answer is all of them, sometimes all at the same time. But I think we're getting into a groove now, but that hasn't, I think, removed the pressure on HR. And how do we help navigate the human side and the human impact of the pandemic?
Yeah, that's true, right? And how do you think, to put your sort of crystal ball on the table for a second, because I'm fascinated by, and I've had, and I'm, as you have as well, I'm sure, and I know we're on a call every morning, typically together with a bunch of other leaders. But what I'm really fascinated by this question of, has this pandemic, is it changed the future of work, in your opinion?
Well, I think
and what it looks like.
Yeah, I think the future of work, certainly when Linda Sharkey and I were researching The Future-Proof Workplace, our book on that very topic, the reality is that the future of work had already changed. I think, though, for many of us, we just hadn't realized it because that change had been slow in some places and rapid in others. We just hadn't connected the dots. But what this has done definitely has pulled and ripped the Band-Aid off in terms of the work from home experiment. And any organization that has been insisting that it can't happen. Now, I recognize in hospitality, there are definitely industries where it doesn't happen at home. But for a large proportion of us, it just changes how we work and how we collaborate. So it's the biggest social experiment, I think, in how work gets done. And it is going to change our attitudes to how and when we return to the workplace.
Now, that's a great segue into the question, what does it look like? How do we go back to work? Because I think political leaders will say, well, we're going to say it's time to go back. And I don't know that you can, and that's great, that's fine. I guess that's their prerogative. I don't know that it's smart, but it's their prerogative. How do companies handle that? Because the inclination, I think, or the thought process might be, well, let's just get back to work, let's turn it back on, and let's all 500 of you show up at work on Monday and we're ready to go. I
Yeah.
don't think it's that simple.
No,
right?
I would agree with you. I mean, if it had delivered a 2-week segue, maybe, then yes, we could perhaps all return to work and it would be like we'd been on a mini vacation. I think part of the challenge is that there is an indefinite future ahead of us, both in terms of when does the first wave of the pandemic ease off enough to allow us to start mingling, but also the reality, I think you just alluded to it there, that when we do start mingling again, is there a resurgent and second wave that might cause us to again revisit and return to social distancing? And so I've been likening it to, in the past, when I've watched the gymnastics and the Olympics, it's can you land the dismount? And right now, I'm not sure that people are planning for the dismount and how do we re-enter into the workplace. Right now, we're all rushing to deal with the questions around how do I get work from home? Do I have a webcam? Do I have a green screen? Can I even do the fundamentals of my role? And how companies and how executives are responding to this right now is critical. We've been talking about engagement, we talk about retention, but if we don't get the human piece and the compassion and connection whilst we are working remotely, then any plans that we have to re-engage the workforce when we return to whatever sense of normality there is will be jeopardized. So we need to ensure that we're building that, maintaining that sense of team now, recognizing the challenges that people have, from setting up the workspace to the fact I'm sharing the workspace with 3 other adults, or I also have children fighting over the Legos and the cat is getting miffed because it's not getting its own private time. We're juggling all of that. And we need to start thinking about how do we do a controlled re-entry? Because it isn't going to be everybody goes back to work on the same day. To your point, that would be uncommon sense, given everything that we've seen play out over the last few weeks.
Yeah. So, I mean, how do you plan for that? I mean, because a lot of this is going to fall on HR, and it's got to be in coordination with corporate leadership or business leadership. I mean, because to me, it's if I'm dealing with all I'm dealing with at home, right, and I'm dealing with this stress, and I know that I'm listening to the experts, and they say, well, the vaccine's not going to be ready for 18 months. I've got a kid with asthma, and I've got a condition or two or whatever, and maybe I'm caring for an elderly parent. And I say to myself, you know what? I've been doing this for a couple months at home. Why would I go back to a crowded office and roll the dice every day on my health and the health of my family until I know I can get a vaccine?
Yeah.
I mean, why would I do that? And so I think HR and organizations have to plan for that sort of conversation, because I don't know that conversation is being held right now. I don't know if people are having that conversation, but they should be. As you were saying, they need to plan for that. I mean, that's
so they need to
because
plan
I think that's
for it.
People are going to.
And certainly in our network with the HR professionals, we're getting together with them 3 times a week in a series that my colleague Eric has termed the corporate bartender, where we are doing just that, sharing expertise, sharing information and resources so that we're not reinventing the wheel, but also providing an opportunity for those HR professionals to invest in themselves and their own well-being. And part of this is those conversations are starting to happen. And the good news is they're not happening in isolation. They're not happening just within HR. They're not just happening at executive suite. They're happening in partnership, at least for the forward-thinking organizations, with the broader workforce. And what they're sharing is that certainly in the current environment, productivity in some places of the organization, yes, it's down as I learn to work over distance, or I'm still waiting access to systems. But in other areas, the majority of our clients are in high-tech, IT, technology, engineering. They're seeing productivity going up. So their software developers are able to write more code. They're not getting as many interruptions. They're collaborating and used to collaborating in a virtual environment. So there are some good news stories that are coming out of this transition. But to your point, I think that whole scale return to the workplace, there isn't going to be a one size fits all. There are going to be tough conversations and tough decisions that need to be made on both sides of the employer and employee relationship around how are we keeping distance in the workplace? How are we trying to ensure that everybody can stay healthy and contribute to the best of their ability, whilst also giving that opportunity and choice to continue to work remotely, where, as we've seen, it does happen, it does work. Why would we then enforce now you must be back in the office with your jacket on the back of the chair situation, the old-fashioned approach?
Yeah. What is, who do you think is, so when those conversations start happening, I can sort of envision this sort of, I mean, if I was in that situation, I'd have a ton of questions, right? I'd have a ton of questions for HR or whoever, my manager, my supervisor. How are you going to keep me safe? What's the policy for gloves and masks and so on? And who's going to clean the office every day and spray it down? I mean, how's that going to happen? I mean, what precautions is the business taking? And somebody brought this up to me last night. I thought it was a really, really good question. I mean, is that also going to have to? That's going to have to be part of the plan, isn't it? I mean, that's going to have to be. Those would be the questions people have to answer.
And that's something that you can start at least collecting what those questions might be. And here's the challenge. This isn't just an HR problem. This isn't an HR issue to resolve. And traditionally, that's where everybody looks is, well, you're the people department, sort it. This has to be a business decision that involves all of the leadership team and the whole of the organization, because we've all got a part to play in terms of how we contribute to that and move forward. And there isn't going to be that silver bullet of one size fits all or an easy answer to this, but starting these conversations early are going to be critical if we're going to navigate through and at least feel like we're half a page ahead in terms of making some of these decisions. And as new information comes to light, as we've seen with the initial onslaught of the pandemic, new information came to light almost hourly and daily, and so plans needed to adjust accordingly. And that will be the same as we do the re-entry. And as we start to emerge from our homes, it's how do we adjust as the second wave comes? It's a predictable surprise. We know it's going to come. So how do we roll back some of these decisions? How do we course correct? I think agility is going to be key versus any sort of set in stone policy that is going to be fit for purpose for a long term. It's going to be guidance that is going to help inform individual and collective decisions for whatever, ... the next week, the next month. And that's how we're going to have to continue to live and navigate with uncertainty as we test the waters and as we start to move forward from this first, shelter at home stage.
I think that's fair. I think that's very fair, because I think and I think setting that expectation and saying, look, we're gonna deal with this in stages. We're gonna deal with it on a weekly basis, maybe even a daily basis. And if we feel like, this is what's going to happen if somebody in the organization is sick, this is going to be kind of what we envision happening. I think that's a fair thing, but I think those are things that you have to address, obviously, and be ready to answer those questions and have a policy, I guess, so that people know that you're thinking ahead and you're thinking forward about, how this is going to work.
So I think for me, in Cultivate, for example, my book, we talk about 4 questions that underpin every, certainly business relationship, but any relationship that we have. And those 4 questions, Rhett, are: firstly, can I count on you? Can I count on you to do the basics, to get your job done, get your stuff back to me so I can do my job? Question number 2 is, can I depend on you? So this is where we move from reactive, can I count on you, to proactive. Can I count on you to go the extra mile, to give me warnings of impending disaster, to correct the error in my spreadsheet, whatever it might be. And those 2 are transactional. And early in my career in finance, that's certainly where many business relationships started and stopped. You do your bit, I do mine, and we'll be fine. And then we wonder why we get politics, silos, and turf wars between departments, between teams in organizations. So for me, the critical questions 3 and 4 are, do I care about you? Do I care about you and your success? Do I care about you as a human being? Do I care about your health and well-being as much as I do my own? And then question number 4, the kicker of them all, is, do I trust you? Now, these 4 questions, when we would deliver our Cultivate workshops, when we were working with teams, they would reflect on their individual relationships, their collective experience. And a few months ago, the answer was mainly yeses. And where there was no's, there was a clear understanding why. I mean, yes, I could do my job. Yes, I'm going the extra mile. Do you care about me? Well, we had lunch last week, etc. And do I trust you? Well, somewhat. But now you look at where we are today. Can you count on me? Well, no, as we've already described, maybe I don't have a full virtual work from home setup. Can you depend on me to go the extra mile? Well, my kids want me to watch Frozen for the 10th time. But if I don't go and do that, they're going to be going stir crazy. So no, you're going to get me doing enough so that I can balance the home and the work expectations. Do I care about you? Well, I'm not sure, because I don't remember the last time we grabbed coffee. And through a webcam, it is so much harder to understand, are you just going through the motions? Or maybe you haven't even bothered to call me or reach out to me. So no. And therefore, the do I trust you becomes questioned. And if we don't invest deliberately in those working relationships, if we aren't deliberately, not just HR, all of us as leaders and team members in our organization, if we're not proactive in reaching out to help check in, ensure that people are set up for success during the transition, then I think we jeopardize our ability to rebuild trust, to keep an engaged workforce, to have people who are willing to take informed risk and apply common sense when we ask them to come back to the workplace. So this is why it needs to be a collective conversation. It can't be just everybody looking at HR and hoping for them to solve it. They are the facilitators. They are part of the conversation, but we need to decide together versus just sitting back and hoping that they can do it all. Because right now, the answer is no, we need to do this together.
Well, it doesn't need to come from them. I mean, the messaging and the leadership needs to come from the top. I mean, there's no doubt about that. HR plays a vital role in sort of implementing that, right? Not setting the policy, but implementing what collectively the leadership has decided is the course of action. I think one of the things about Cultivate that I find really kind of fascinating now, and just maybe in general. It's probably more of a general question than about the book, but how do you, we so many people are talking about how to hold meetings over Zoom and how to communicate and how to, all this. But what I really don't hear a lot of is how do you build trust right now? How do you build those relationships? Because right now everybody's stressed out. They're stressed out about their health. They're stressed out about how the business is going to survive, if it's going to survive. They don't know whether or not that's going to happen or not. And so they're worried, and maybe they've had a spouse or a partner lose a job because of this. So there's their financial concerns. So it's like a triple whammy. I mean, you're getting we always live with stress, but I think this is a huge stressor right now. But so how do you build that trust, and how do you build relationships on a Zoom call, or does it go way beyond that? How do you do that in where we are right now? Because I don't hear a lot of advice about that. Like,
no,
to truly build a relationship.
And you're right, we've all been experiencing those internal and external triggers of stress. If you've done any emotional intelligence reading, we know that the amygdala is our threat detection radar. It's answering that question of, do I eat it or does it eat me? And I know for myself, the first few weeks especially, it was on hyper alert because everything I was seeing and reading was threat, warning, Will Robinson, warning. And so I had that knot in my stomach. I felt sick. I wasn't sleeping. And that change curve, which the textbooks always show is such a nice linear line of shock, surprise, disbelief, denial, acceptance, renewed action. Well, as I said, it was a roller coaster for me, back and forth. And even now, 3 or 4 weeks in, I will have good days. And then there will be moments and days where I am feeling anxious and I'm doubting myself, I'm doubting others. And that is hard. And so how do you navigate that, Rhett? You do it 2 ways. One is you've got to schedule white space where you can step away so you can re-engage more powerfully. Whether it is as a colleague of mine who's just been doing, there's a business in Boulder here, Liberty Puzzles, phenomenal wooden puzzles, not traditional shapes. And we have a puzzle club. So just focusing on something that's different, that you can have an element of control and focus your mind on what is not happening outside. It's whether it's taking the daily walk at a social distance, whether it's taking exercise, whether it's eating healthily, whatever you can to take that white space for you. Because one of the challenges we all have now we're working from home is we have blurred those different parts of our lives. They're all integrated, but stepping away can be hard. Now, another colleague of mine was talking about how work is the only time that he feels normal. So if that is your anchor, great, go for it. But if it turns into a 12-hour a day, 14-hour a day anchor, then you still need to be looking at, are you feeding your soul? Are you feeding your body? Are you feeding your mind? And then as leaders and as team members, how do I build trust? How do I maintain those relationships? It's like you and I, Rhett, it happens one conversation at a time. But building in time within our team meetings to celebrate, as we do at SkyeTeam, ripples and joys. Things that have made us happy this week, notwithstanding that we're all on lockdown, and ripples, things that we've done to help move our clients forward and get them unstuck. Building in time for the small talk of bring your pet to work. I mean, you've got the cat in the house. Let's all show the cat. Let's have a little bit of frivolity. At SkyeTeam, as much as I've got a green screen behind me right now, we have the whimsy backdrops. So they aren't all corporate backdrops. I've been posting past vacation photos. But all of that now is a prompt for where was that taken? We're sharing a little bit of personal information. We're building those thin webs of connection beyond the, have you done your project? Where's the task? Where's my spreadsheet? Where's my stuff? So we need to build in time personally for me to disconnect, but also within the team to connect at a human level, not just at the work to-do list level.
I saw a thing that really touched me the other day. It was a principal, I don't know where he was, and he went to the homes of every one of his high school seniors. And I thought that was a really, and it's obviously they didn't touch, and he stayed, in the driveway or wherever. But I thought that was a really good way to go and see. I mean, he's a principal, he's going to see his students, but I'd say, if I was managing people, I think that'd be a really great way to just go by and say hi at a social distance and say, how are you doing? Everything okay? And show that you've made an effort, aside from getting on a Skype call or a Zoom call or just a phone call, that you're taking some interest in them. Maybe that's a little too far, but I thought that was a really nice touch. So we've got, let's see, Carlos Eduardo, thanks for joining us today. Ruby Vesley, thank you. Christy Lowry, hey, Christy, nice to see you on. Thank you for joining. Collective is key. That's true. I'm sure you would agree. Let's see. Ruby says, yes, agility is key right now to navigate uncertainty. That's true. This is not a local challenge. This is a global challenge, which makes it hard to, let's see what Eduardo said, or Carlos says. This is a hard challenge, I guess, is what he was making a point of. Thank you guys for your comments. So let me ask you this. What is, how do leaders right now I think sometimes there is that we talked about it briefly. There is an expectation that HR is going to handle this. What is a leader's role right now? Let's talk about that, because you do a lot of leadership development.
Yeah.
What do people expect from leaders right now? What do they expect?
So
what do I need to give as a leader?
So here's what I'm hearing from the leaders: that it's compassion, it's curiosity, and it's listening. So those are the three things that I think that the best leaders that I'm hearing about are demonstrating right now. And compassion is recognizing that if we go back to that traditional change curve, maybe today I've navigated and I'm at renewed action and, hey, we're going to beat this and everything's fine, let's get back to business. Compassion is recognizing that for everybody else on your team, they may not yet be there, or they were there 10 minutes ago, but now they're back at the shock piece because maybe they've just heard a family friend is diagnosed with COVID, or one of the kids has started to cough and now we're immediately, oh my goodness, what's happening? So the compassion is recognizing people where they're at. And that's where the curiosity and listening comes in, because we cannot go into any meeting or all hands with this is what it feels like. This is what you need to do. This is what I'm doing. Therefore, you need to copy me. Curiosity is what's working for you right now, what's not, and what's one thing I or we can do to help you or your family or your work team navigate this. And that's where the listening comes in, and listening with the curiosity and compassion so that we don't get defensive around the should-have, could-have's expectations, but listening to the heartfelt needs of the people and where they're at today so that we can help respond, because that's what builds trust. That's what builds confidence. It's what builds the connection that maintains the sense of team. And again, when we start to communicate how do we re-emerge from this? I am ready and bought in to follow and stay with you. So it's compassion, it's curiosity, and it's active listening to understand where people are at and how do we respond appropriately, both individually and for the broader group as a whole.
Do you have to set, because working from home, and a lot of people are working from home right now, or some people are having to go in the office, but how do you look at productivity right now? It's a question I've had in some of my coaching lately and my consulting lately, is what do I expect from people? Mm-hmm. And how do I give them parameters? Because this work at home thing is new and this has all been kind of pushed on us. How do I set those boundaries? I had one CEO said, I've decided that I'm going to do a stand-up meeting in the morning. I'm going to do a stand-up meeting in the evening, and then say there are going to be no more email. We do our meeting at 5:30, and I say, look, no more emails, no more calls, nothing else. Shut down. Go spend time with your family or whatever the people that you're spending time with, and don't work until 7 or 8 or 9, and that's not going to be the expectation here.
Yep.
And I thought that was a really nice thing, but at the same time, boundaries are hard to set as they are, and in this environment, really even harder.
I agree, but it's making the implicit explicit. And to your point, as you've just described, it's recalibrating. What does it mean to be at work? What are office hours? Because in the past, yes, I commuted to the office 8 till 6, whatever it was, done. And in between, I would attend meetings, be triple booked. You go to the break room for coffee.
Right.
Well, now that I'm home, that doesn't necessarily work. So we have organizations and clients where the leaders are doing, as you've described, the regular all hands communications, the fireside chats with. And what those leaders are doing are demonstrating authenticity, their own vulnerability and uncertainty, but they are being available and being consistent. And whether it's scheduled for an hour and they stay until the last person leaves, it builds confidence because I have accessibility. You're not in your ivory tower. And I think with communication, as we've seen in all of the states, et cetera, but certainly in New York, the consistency and the pattern of those communications, even when we've got bad news to share. again, builds trust and a reliance in terms of I'm not now writing my own story and filling in the blanks. So if you're going to commit to an every Friday all hands, make sure you do an every Friday all hands, because otherwise here I am sitting at home on my own and I'm going to assume that you didn't do it this week because there's bad news, it's personal. And to your point earlier on, I'm about to lose my job. Oh my goodness. And then I go down into this spiral. So you need to communicate consistently. You need to communicate authentically. There you go. Show your own vulnerability, ask questions, be available. That makes a huge difference.
Yeah, that makes sense. And go back to the question about productivity. What's the how do you manage that? And how do you say, I mean, how do you sort of recalibrate what's expected of people? I mean,
I was coaching a leader just yesterday, and we were talking about that. And in the past, it might be managing by walking around, because I could walk around the office and stop by your desk and ask how things are going. For me now, it's definitely managing by results, being very clear about two things. One is, what are the projects and priorities that absolutely need to be delivered this week? But now allowing me to decide how and when I do it. So it's not now the 8 till 6, maybe it's the 8 till 11. Now we've made it implicit on my team that 11 till noon, and which time zone am I talking about, being clear there, it's lunch, go have lunch with your family. Noon till 2 is frozen for the umpteenth time. And then I'm getting back on 2 till 5, and then I put the kids to bed and I might work in the evening. But the how I carve up the day is now down to me, so long as I know what are the priorities that I need to get done this week. And maybe being clear that 9 to 11 Mountain Time, since I'm based in Colorado, are now the core office hours. Being clear as not just what needs to get done, but also what project should we absolutely pause right now. We're going to pause, do not work on this. We'll come back to it in September, or we'll come back to it in 3 weeks, because that allows me now to reduce the stress of competing priorities and the million things that I could be doing, to focus on the few things I should absolutely be doing. So we need to look at both what needs to be done and the how and when I'm doing it. That's how we can start letting people feel a sense of control over their work and their family situation.
No, that's brilliant advice. I love that, saying, look, here's my schedule, right? And being very clear with your supervisor, your leadership, whatever, that's how you've had to carve up your day, because you've got kids and you've got, they finish their school at a certain time if they're in school. And, I love putting a schedule and asking people to give you a sort of a tentative sort of breakdown of when you're going to be available, when you're going to be working. That's great. I like that. And then freezing things that are not, and making clear what is important, and being very clear about priorities. Because that makes a lot of sense to me.
If we don't make it explicit, I'm going to assume I'm supposed to work on it, and now I'm burning the candle at both ends. And even technology, I mean, think about it. We've all become Zoom king and queens, or the equivalent, whichever platform you're using. But sitting and looking at a camera is absolutely exhausting. And so I've downloaded an app that now, literally this week, it took me a week to do it, but an app that's going to let me know every 30 minutes that I need to get up and move. Doing that in your Zoom meeting so that people are stretching, so that we're not just spot welded to the place. Talking about how we're using technology, I don't know about you, Rhett, but my various communication methods have blown up in terms of email and text and LinkedIn messages and WhatsApp meetings. And Eric, love him to bits, on our team, he set up a Slack channel for us all. And so I've now got to look and learn that. And I know it's going to help curate it all. But the one thing that isn't is my phone. So right now, I would also go back to your earlier question about how do you connect with people? Ring them. Because everybody's using this technology, but the old-fashioned phone call, not so much. Now, of course, you may not come up as a user ID yet. But again, as a team member, let's talk about how we communicate. How are we communicating urgent messages? And if you've got a system like Slack that you've been using in the office and it's just migrated effortlessly, still pick up the phone. Because even if you don't get me live, leave me a voicemail that says, hey, Morag, I was thinking about you. How's it going? What can I do for you? And I may or may not call you back, but I tell you, when I get that voicemail, it'll be, oh, Rhett, he cares. Oh, my goodness, that's lovely. And again, we've built connection. So call people.
There you go.
People.
No, I was on a Zoom call Friday night at 6 for some ridiculous reason, and I had this overwhelming feeling of like just being absolutely zoomed out. Like I'm just
done.
tired of sitting in front of the. You're absolutely right. I know the exact feeling. Like this is the 7th or 8th call today. I am just done looking at this camera right here.
Well, yes, and then you're thinking like maybe I should have put on a different shirt. You know, you got to get past that. I mean, when you are on it, please put the camera on, even if it's only for a few minutes. And if you've got dodgy bandwidth, then by all means switch it off. But even a few seconds of eye contact helps. But doing 8 hours with us all in the Brady Bunch, I mean, it's great. Thank goodness in some ways the pandemic's happening now, not 5 years ago. But yeah, find other ways to communicate.
Well, talk about the book briefly. I know you've got a copy with you.
Cultivate, my first book. There you go.
Yes, Cultivate. And you can order that on Amazon, I'm presuming.
Yes, you can. In fact, this is brand new. It's just gone into paperback and it's available in Kindle too. And I wrote it because I realized in 15 years in commercial finance, that was my first career. So it was all numbers and business plans and cash flow forecasts and people with the latest, greatest widget or service. And then I realized, well, hang on a minute. If it's that fancy schmancy, why aren't you able to pay the bank back? Why is the business not as successful as your forecasts might predict? And it became apparent that you can have the best systems and products and ideas, but if you don't invest in the relationships, if you don't invest in the human side, you are not going to be as successful as you or your bank or others might like. And so Cultivate was designed to provide a language and framework that gets past the finger pointing and blame that happens in many organizations when things don't go to plan, and to understand the health of your professional relationships and who are your allies, the people who have your back, not just on the good days, but also on the tough days. The ones who will give you the tough feedback, the kick in the pants when you need it, and not leave you hanging, but then help you to navigate and move through the challenges that, hey, we're all facing right now, and we're all going to continue to face in different ways and at different times in our careers and in our organizations.
Well, thank you so much for being on the program today. This was really a fascinating conversation, and I'd love to have you back, in the next couple of weeks as this transition happens, right? This transition from sort of managing the crisis to the next step, which is how do we go back to work?
Yeah.
Because I think there are going to be some interesting case studies and interesting conversations that are being had, and some and interesting dilemmas, I think. Challenges for companies. And I think as those conversations happen and then evolve and you learn more from your clients and hear more, I'd love to have you back just sort of for an update.
I would love to do that. I was thinking even just about our own business and travel. As it starts to relax maybe in the US, but I can see a point that it becomes challenging going for my international events if we have a requirement for 14 days quarantine or proof that you've had the virus. So there are some near-term immediate implications that need to be considered, but also there are those ripple effects that are going to impact us in unforeseen ways, but in many ways that we can start to anticipate. So that would be a fabulous conversation, Rhett.
Yeah, thank you. That would, and I do appreciate it very much. And thank you for spending some time with us today. Hopefully we answered questions that you may have that are maybe lingering in your mind. And if not, certainly please ask them on social media. We'll follow up if you ask questions even after the program. And have a great day. Have a productive week. Enjoy your time with family and whomever you're sequestered with. And we'll see you tomorrow.